They say goats don't cry. But the one Ikin brought home did. It cried like a child. It bled like a wounded soul. And the moment it entered his house, peace ran away and never returned. Let me tell you what happened, so you won't make the same mistake. Ikin was not just a trader, he was the trader. From Nko to Ik to Ori market, everyone knew the man who wore coral beads and walked with the pride of a king. He sold everything, cloth from the coast, pepper from the north, even soaps with foreign writing on the wrappers. But if you expected him to give out credit or show mercy, you didn't know Ikin. He would rather let Gary rot in his storehouse than give it to a hungry widow. His wife, Norma, was no different. Proud, sharp-tongued, and always watching for who was watching her. She walked through the market like a peacock, wrappers tight, perfume strong, mouth sharper than a knife. People respected them, but secretly, nobody liked them. That year, trade began to dry up. The rains had come late. The yams were stunted. The villagers were buying less, and the market was slower than a tired drumbeat. Ikin became restless. Prices are too high around here, he muttered. I'll go beyond the hills. I've heard there are cheaper goods in those forest towns. I'll come back with enough to double my profits. Norma packed him boiled yam and palm oil, and waved him off with a half-smile. Just don't return empty-handed, she said, adjusting her galley. Ikin loaded his donkey and headed east, past the rivers, past the familiar villages, and into strange lands. He stopped at 3 markets, disappointed each time. Either the prices were worse or the goods were rotten. On the 4th day, deep inside a thick forest path, he reached a quiet market he had never heard of. No noise. No haggling. Just traders sitting silently beside their goods, eyes heavy, faces unreadable. He moved slowly, inspecting a few things. Nothing caught his eye. Just as he turned to leave, he heard a voice behind him. Soft. Old. My son, the voice said, you look like a man in need of a blessing. Ikin turned. An old woman sits there, skin wrinkled like dry bark, a faded wrapper tied loosely on her chest. Beside her stood a beautiful goat, white, spotless, healthy-looking. How much? Ikin asked quickly, eyeing the goat's strong legs. She shook her head. Nothing. It's free. He raised a brow. Free? Since when did market women become Father Christmas? The old woman smiled. It is yours to take. But hear me clearly, do not kill it without knowing its story. Ikin chuckled, confused. So what am I to do with a goat I cannot kill? She stepped forward, looked him in the eye, and said it again, slower. Do not kill this goat without knowing its story. Then she turned, sat down, and said nothing else. Ikin paused for a moment. Then shrugged. A free goat is still a free goat, he muttered. He tied a rope around its neck, gave her a lazy wave, and began his journey back. He didn't notice that when he looked back after 10 steps. The old woman was no longer there. Only dust and silence. The sun had barely touched the horizon when Ikin returned home, rope in one hand, goat in the other, pride in his chest. Children gathered near his gate, whispering. A goat. Just one. After all that travel. Did he run out of money? Ikin ignored them. He was tired, dusty, and hungry. But his mind was on the curious deal he had made. He placed the goat in the small pen beside his compound and entered the house. Inside, Norma was adjusting her jewelry in front of a cracked mirror when he called out. I'm back. And I brought something. She turned, unimpressed at first, until she stepped outside and saw the goat. It was clean, strong, and young. A white beauty. Only one, she asked, arms folded. Ikin sighed, you won't believe the story. I got it for free. Some old woman gave it to me and said, get this, Don't kill it without knowing its story. Nwoma burst out laughing. She gave you a goat and a proverb. She walked up to the animal, circled it slowly, then snapped her fingers. It's fat enough. We'll slaughter it tomorrow. The Obika family is visiting, and you know they don't eat nonsense. Let's give them a proper feast. Ikin hesitated. But, the warning. Oh please, she cut him off. You always say we must stop believing in old village superstitions. Now you're scared of a goat. She waved her wrapper and walked back inside. That night, the goat didn't sleep. It didn't eat either. It just stood still in the pen, eyes wide open, staring at the dark. And when the moon reached its peak, it began to bleat. Not loudly, but strangely. Not the murmur of an animal. But something softer, higher, like the whimper of a child trying not to cry. Early the next morning, Nwoma sent for a young butcher in the village. The goat didn't resist when they pulled it out. It just looked around, as if it knew. When the blade came down, it let out one cry. One. But that one cry sent chills into Ikin's spine. For the briefest second, it didn't sound like a goat. Nwoma, on the other hand, felt unconcerned. It sounded like a voice. Even the butcher paused. Did you hear? Just finish the job. Nwoma shouted. Time is going. They skinned it, cleaned it, chopped it, and dropped the pieces into the biggest pot they had. They added onions, pepper, scent leaves, and enough oil to make it shine. Soon, the smell of stew filled the compound. Guests began arriving, some with kola nuts, others with bottles of palm wine. Laughter, greetings, and loud voices returned to the compound for the first time in weeks. But as the sun began to lower, things began to shift. It started with the smallest pot, set aside for children. The lid shook slightly. Nwoma opened it, and stepped back. The stew inside had turned dark. Almost black. Thick. Still. Unnatural. She frowned, covered it quickly, and moved to the main pot. The moment she opened it, thick, red liquid bubbled to the surface. At first, she thought it was oil. But it wasn't. It was heavier. It moved slowly. And then, it began to drip down the sides of the pot. One drip. Two. Then streams. As if the pot itself was weeping blood. Inside the house, a baby began to cry uncontrollably. A small boy ran from the backyard screaming, "There's a woman outside the fence. She's not walking, she's floating." Guests began to murmur. Ikin tried to laugh it off. It's just a child's imagination. Let's eat. But the crying grew louder. Not the baby anymore, the walls. The walls of the house began to echo with a strange sound, as if something inside them was weeping. One of the men dropped his plate. Another began sweating uncontrollably. Then a woman stood up and shouted, "I'm leaving. Something is not right here." Within minutes, the entire group of guests began rushing out, grabbing wrappers, plates, slippers, anything they had brought. They ran. Nwoma chased after them, shouting, "Where are you going? It's only goat meat." But they were gone. Ikin stood in the compound. The sun was almost gone. The food was untouched. The pot was still dripping. And in the pen where the goat once stood, there was a puddle of red water. No rain had fallen. That night, the house was silent. But not peaceful. Every time Ikin closed his eyes, he heard it. A sobbing sound. Close. Inside the walls. Like something trapped, trying to speak through tears. And Nwoma. She stared at the ceiling all night. Unblinking. Her lips moved slightly, as if repeating something no one could hear. By morning, Nwoma could no longer get out of bed. Her lips were dry. Her skin had lost its color. Her eyes, once proud and sharp, looked far away, as if they had seen something too dark to explain. Ikin sat beside her, fanning her gently. His hands trembled. "Speak to me," he whispered. But she said nothing. Outside, the village was already talking. Didn't they say the goat was free? Didn't they say the old woman warned them? And they still cooked it. Word spread fast. The feast that became a fright. The meat that made the pots cry. The guests that ran without finishing their drinks. Neighbors avoided the compound. No greetings. No visits. Even the local herbalist, who once drank palm wine in Ikin's parlor, refused to come inside. "I don't deal with spirits," he said, standing at the gate. "Not the kind that bleed from pots." He handed Ikin a small calabash of bitter roots and turned away. Ikin's shop in the market, once crowded, now stood empty. His best goods, spices, cloth, dried fish, began to disappear. First one, then another. No broken doors. No footprints. Just gone. One morning, he opened a wooden chest where he kept his money. Bundles of clean, folded notes. Now blackened. Some had holes. Others had turned to powder. He touched them and they dissolved, like ash from a fire he never saw. On the third night, it came. Ikin had dozed off near the foot of the bed, the fire dim, his wife wheezing softly. He opened his eyes to a sound. Not crying. Whispering. He sat up. Looked around. Then, at the doorway, he saw it. The goat. But no longer tied. No longer four-legged. It stood upright. Small. Human-shaped. A child. Its eyes glowed like whetstones. Its voice was soft, but heavy with pain. "You were warned," it said. "I was waiting. Not for death. Not for your fire. But for my story to be known." Ikin's lips shook. He tried to speak, but no sound came. The child stepped closer. "They called me a thief. My own blood. My own mother." Its voice cracked. "I was punished without truth. Cursed to wander the earth until someone brought me home." Its face turned toward the kitchen. "You cooked me," it said, "when you could have freed me." Then it vanished, like dust caught in wind. Ikin screamed and woke up, covered in sweat. Norma stirred slightly for the first time in 2 days. She opened her mouth. But her voice came out wrong. Not hers. High-pitched. Hollow. "She's crying again," she whispered. Ikin backed away. "Who's crying?" "The girl. The one in the wall. She says she's cold." She turned her head slowly, her eyes glazed. "She says she wants to go home." The next morning, Ikin didn't go to the market. He didn't touch the shop. He sat under the orange tree behind the house, staring into space. A small boy passed by and paused. "Mama said you should go and see Motsi Ogbo." Ikin looked up. "Why?" She said only he talks to people after they've spoken to spirits. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Ikin walked, alone, toward the edge of the village. To the house of Motsi Ogbo. The old man sat outside, wrapped in a faded wrapper, chewing bitter cola slowly. He didn't speak. He just looked up as Ikin approached, and tapped a stool beside him. Ikin sat. The silence stretched. Then, Motsi Ogbo spoke. "You saw her, didn't you?" Ikin nodded slowly. "It wasn't her. It was a child." Ogbo chewed once more, then spat. "They all appear in the form they last remembered." Ikin frowned. "What do you mean?" Ogbo turned to face him fully. "There is a tale, long buried, of a child wrongfully cursed by her own people. A girl born with strange eyes. She was blamed when things went wrong, when a harvest failed, when a coin went missing. He shook his head. They never asked questions. They just accused. They gave her to the forest. Ikin's mouth went dry. The woman who gave me the goat. She Isaiah, Ogbo said, eyes narrowing. She was the only one who believed the child was innocent. But by the time she returned to the village to protest, the deed was done. Ogbo stood, his bones creaking. The goat you brought home was never meant to be eaten. Ikin looked away, ashamed. Is it too late? He whispered. Ogbo paused. Then said, only if you do nothing. He pointed eastward. Go back. Find her resting place. Take an offering. Speak what was never spoken. Only then, Ogbo said, with a crying stop. That night, Ikin packed lightly. No jewelry. No wrappers. No pride. Just a calabash, a patch of salt, a few curries, and a bottle of fresh water. Before leaving, he sat beside Noma and touched her hand. I'll be back, he said softly. She didn't respond. But one tear slid down her cheek. Before dawn, Ikin left his home without looking back. The village was quiet. Even the crickets seemed to hush themselves. The moon hung low, pale and watchful, as if it too wanted to see where he would go. He carried no staff, wore no shoes. Only a small satchel slung across his chest, filled with offerings, salt, water, a cowrie pouch, and a bitter kola nut wrapped in leaves, items Motsi Ogbo said the spirit child would understand. But this wasn't a straight path. Motsi Ogbo had warned him, this road doesn't live on any map. You will not find it unless you walk with regret in your chest and truth on your lips. And so, for the first time in his life, Ikin walked with humility. The forest he entered wasn't like the others. It didn't hum or buzz. It listened. Every step echoed louder than it should have. Every rustle of leaves felt like a whisper behind his back. At one point, he tried to rest under a tree, but the wind picked up, soft at first, then stronger. The branches above creaked and groaned. One snapped and fell just inches from his leg. He understood, keep moving. By midday, he reached a clearing. In the middle stood a single hut, old, roof half collapsed, walls covered in vines. But beside it was a grave. Unmarked. Untouched. Just a small mound of red earth, surrounded by broken palm fronds. He stepped closer. Suddenly, the air changed. Heavy. Colder. Ikin dropped to his knees and opened the satchel. He placed the cowries in a circle. Poured the water slowly onto the grave. Sprinkled salt over the earth. Then placed the kola nut in the center. And then, he spoke. His voice shook at first. I don't know your name. I don't know your face. But I know now that you were not a thing to be butchered, not a meal for my table. He took a deep breath. They said you were a thief. Maybe even cursed. But they were wrong. And I didn't ask questions. I saw a gift and forgot the warning. Tears began to form in his eyes. I brought you home when I should have brought you peace. I gave you fire when you needed freedom. He lowered his head. I came to say I am sorry. Truly. From the deepest place I have. Silence. Then, a wind blew through the clearing. Soft. Gentle. The trees swayed, and for the first time in days, it didn't feel threatening. Ikin looked up, and there she was. A girl. Barefoot. Eyes wide. Standing beside the grave. She didn't speak. But she smiled. A small, tired smile. Then slowly, she stepped into the earth. And vanished. As the last leaf settled on the grave, the air lightened. The vines on the hut fell away. The roof stopped creaking. A small white flower began to bloom from the grave's edge. Ikin stared in disbelief. Then, without a word, he knelt down again and whispered, "Thank you." His journey home took only half the time. The forest no longer resisted him. Birds returned to the trees. A cool breeze guided his steps. He felt as if the land itself was clearing a path for him. When he reached the village boundary, people looked at him differently. Some nodded. Some stepped aside in silence. They didn't know what had happened. But something had changed. Ikin entered his compound just as the sun was dipping again. He opened the door slowly, expecting the worst. But there, on the mat, sat Nuoma. Awake. Her eyes clearer than they'd been in days. She looked at him and whispered, "It stopped crying." He dropped to his knees, overwhelmed. That night, they sat outside under the stars. No words. Just stillness. For the first time in many days, their home was quiet. Not silent with fear, but quiet with peace. The whispers in the walls were gone. The blood had stopped running from the cooking pots. And the goat? Nothing remained, not even a hoof print in the yard where it had once stood. But not all wounds leave scars on the skin. Ikin sat most mornings by the front step, staring at the dirt road where customers used to line up. His shop still stood, but barely. Most of his goods had spoiled. Some had been taken when no one was looking. A few neighbors began to return, but only to greet. Never to buy. And yet, Ikin did not complain. Because something inside him had shifted, something deeper than pride. Nuoma, too, was not the same. She walked slower now. Spoke less. But her eyes had softened. Her voice, when it came, no longer carried the weight of control, but the tone of thoughtfulness. She often sat beneath the orange tree, listening to the breeze. Sometimes she would say things like, "I wonder what would have happened if we just waited." Or, "Not everything that looks like fortune is a blessing." Ikin never answered. He didn't need to. One market day, he went out with his last bag of cowries, small coins he had saved, thinking he might restart his trade. Instead of buying goods, he found an old woman, wrinkled, toothless, sitting on the roadside, trying to sell cracked calabashes and frayed brooms. Her hands shook as she tried to lift one. Ikin reached into his pouch, took out every last coin, and placed them in front of her. She looked up, startled. "Baiko, sir, I have nothing worth." Ikin raised his hand gently. "You have endured," he said. "That's enough." He turned and walked away. Later that day, the story spread. People began to talk again, this time with curiosity, not fear. The man who used to sell pepper like gold, now gives away silver. The same one who roasted goat for pride, now eats yam and oil with contentment. Some laughed. Others nodded. But a few understood. One evening, a young boy approached him. "Uncle Ikin, will you ever sell in the market again?" Ikin smiled. "Maybe. But not like before." "What will you sell, then?" He looked up at the sky, the stars just starting to twinkle. "Only what won't curse me when I sleep." The boy tilted his head, confused. "Like what?" Ikin chuckled softly and patted the boy's head. "Clean hands. A calm heart. A name without stain. Those are enough for any man." At night, he and Nuoma would sit quietly. The wind would move through their compound, touching the old pots, brushing the trees, but no longer bringing dread. Just air. Just life. They didn't regain their riches. But they had something new. Peace. And in the village, they say that when the wind gets especially soft at dusk, if you listen closely, you might still hear the faint giggle of a small girl, finally free, dancing between the trees. not weeping, but laughing.